All right, hi everybody. So here we are. This is pretty much the big finale. There will be one step after this assignment where we'll kind of cobble everything together, but factually speaking, this is the last assignment. So we've gone through the entire process. We've now zoomed in, we've enlarged, we've used the grid method, and we've gone through and added a little bit of a color scheme to our picture. But this is not our final drawing. What we're about to create will become our final. So you will do one last copy, okay? Now, I'm gonna set this aside. We are also going to skip the idea of doing a border for this project. We'll bring the border back in our final kind of compilation. But what we're gonna get into is probably the most intimidating aspect of the project. We're gonna do a self-portrait. Now, it seems like a whole lot, especially for just a 2D design class. This is not a intro to drawing or advanced drawing class. How am I supposed to draw myself? Well, the thing is, we're not gonna aim for extreme perfection here. We're not gonna aim for photorealism. I'm gonna teach you two very simple techniques that are gonna allow you to create a close enough self-portrait. And then, once we've done that, in the background of that self-portrait, we're going to transpose this design that has a whole bunch of meaningful aspects to our lives, to our theme, into the background. So the portrait will be on top, okay? There'll be a couple little curveballs that I'll throw to you at the very tail end, but for right now, we're gonna focus just on the picture. You are absolutely welcome to work from a digital picture if you want to work off your phone or off your laptop or something. I printed this for the sake of the demo. You are also, if you feel that you're really struggling, you are also welcome to print it full scale so that instead of trying to draw and enlarge, which is what I'm going to do, right? This is a smaller picture. You could draw it one-to-one. It could literally like trace over, okay, the eyes go here, the nose goes there, that kind of thing, okay? So there are some tips and tricks, and I'll show a lot of these to you in class as well. If you've drawn any kind of portrait before, there's basically two styles to drawing. There's the first one, which usually goes by the word, or by the term, the Loomis method, and that's where you kind of start off with kind of a sphere, and you kind of divide that sphere almost like a beach ball, and then maybe you lower or drop that down, so you get to kind of this jaw shape. Can add on the jaw. Then you can kind of think of the side of the face, comes down. And you think about where the eyes go, the nose, the mouth, and the ears, okay? So pretty quickly you can kind of construct, you can kind of build out this, this form that looks human-ish, right? And if you were drawing from your imagination, this is the way to go, okay? Drawing from kind of a sphere and building on top of that, excellent methodology. However, because we're gonna be drawing from a photographic reference, we're instead gonna be using the Bargue method. The Bargue method relies solely on construction lines, almost like you have a block of plaster and you're chiseling pieces away. So instead of adding like a sphere and then I'm adding on the jaw, right? Instead, we're gonna be subtracting. And the basic way that we're gonna go through, and I'll show you here on my paper, but let's pretend I'm drawing one-to-one, so exactly the same scale and size and everything. What you wanna think about is kind of where is the center and what are the angles coming off of that center? So what is the angle of my chin? Going all the way back to our very first project, we're basically just gonna be using perfectly straight lines for this. As you go along, you can start to pull those spheres and blocks and 1-point and 2-point perspective tricks that we've learned, and it's all gonna come together in this one portrait. So I'm not gonna use, see I've taped off, I'm not gonna use actual measurements. I am gonna use measuring kind of generic lines. So for example, if this is my portrait, right? Let's see, I'm just gonna go kind of here. From here to here is the entire picture. The center of my nose is about here. So you'll see that it's actually off center a little bit. There's the actual center, okay? So if I was drawing one-to-one, for example, I could just put a little line right here, just generically, right? Just right there. And I know that's about the center of my head. I could do the same thing again, and say, okay, where about is the edge of my head? So there's like the hat right about there, and there's kind of my ear right about there. So again, if I was doing 1 to 1, I could kind of say there's about my ear, and there's about my hat. Okay, pretty cool. I can do the same thing again. I'll just wipe these lines off. And I can do the height. So again, I'm just gonna say, there's the top, there's the bottom, there's kind of my collar for my shirt. My neck kind of goes in and back out. Looks like my chin is right about here. Let's see, top of the hat and top of my head, right? So again, same kind of thing. Very rough lines. Top of the hat, or top of the brim of my hat. There's kind of my chin, top of the neck, and going down to kind of there. So somewhere in here, in this kind of boxed off area, somewhere in here is my head, right? I know that's the top of my hat, so we can assume it kind of comes down here somewhere. I know that's kind of my chin. I know that my neck kind of curves up in here somewhere. And then because my neck stops, it's gonna shoot out kind of in that direction and comes down and shoots off in that direction somewhere. And I know that that's the kind of shirt. So that's my head. Now, clearly there's gonna be more detail going on than just this. But this is basically the process. And you just go along and keep finding these little points, little areas that you say, oh, well, how wide is my chin? Well, if this is the side and that's the side, the width of my chin is right about there. Let's transfer that over. Okay, that's about the width of my chin. And if that's the width of my chin, what angle is the jawline coming out? Well, it's about that angle. How about this side? It's about that angle, okay? And again, it goes on forever and ever because they're just straight lines. I don't really know where they go until I close them off. And you keep going along one line at a time, finding little markers, little points along the way, and you say to yourself, okay, let's see. So if this is the top of the picture and that's the bottom, my eyes are around here, my nose about there, the top of my mouth, and we'll say like the bottom of my mouth. So again, if I'm doing 1 to 1, I can transfer that over. Eyes are somewhere in here. Nose is about there. Top of the mouth, kind of the corners, and the bottom of my mouth, right? Again, I can find the angles. And I'm just looking at the picture, literally just copying this angle. If you have a compass and you want to literally measure like, oh, that's a 20-degree angle, go for it. Let's see, there's the bridge of my nose, right? And slowly, and again, I stress slowly, this will start coming together. I'm gonna do my hat, kind of the brim of my hat. Okay, let's see, kind of the edge. And I'm just finding rough, straight lines. Let's see, there's the side of my face. Comes in there. Edge of the hat. Kind of cuts that off. Neck shape. And just like with our abstract drawing, you're gonna overshoot occasionally. That's perfectly fine. Straight line for the neck. Angle for the neck here. And angle for the shoulder. Now, if you want, I really suggest pull your lines a lot farther than you think you need to. Don't be afraid if you overshoot. Having more of a line is going to help because you're going to find very quickly a lot of things kind of match up. My Adam's apple here almost exactly lines up to my ear, so I can use that to my advantage, right? Now I know my ear is kind of in here somewhere. And if one ear is up there. Well, so's the other one, right? And again, it's gonna take some time, but the more of these little lines that you start placing, the more you're gonna find it starts to look like a face. You can use your ruler. You do not have to. You are welcome to just kind of eyeball it. That's perfectly fine. But it'll start to look like something, right? Now, what do you do for the next step? Okay, once you've got these kind of rough lines, you keep getting smaller and smaller lines until, again, it's gonna start to look like your actual portrait, right? You will be able to see what you're working with. And if you were to show it to a friend and show your photo reference, they'd be able to tell exactly what you're doing. But if you showed somebody just this, they may not be able to tell who you're drawing yet. Step 2, okay, now, what do we do from here? Well, now we're gonna do the same process right on top, but we're just gonna worry about any heavy shadows. So imagine if you kind of squint your eyes a little bit, if you're looking at your photograph, where do you see big, heavy shapes of shadow, right? I see the corners of my mouth, underneath my nose, a little on this side of my nose, right? This kind of area right there is in heavy shadow. This part of my neck, anything like that. Find those areas and block them in the same methodology, right? So something, let's do like the neck down here. I know I have my Adam's apple that kind of moves inwards right there. Cuts over underneath my chin, cuts up, kind of like that. And then right down here, let's see, kind of cuts over. So we're gonna say this shape is kind of my, my neck, right? I've got a little hint of a white line right there, so I'm gonna ignore that as well. Once you've got that, color it in. Just flat shading. Doesn't have to be super heavy, because again, all this is gonna get blended out. We're gonna adjust things and change things, but we're starting to build up the second layer. And the second layer is anywhere you have shadow. What do I do about my shirt? What do I do about my hat or hair or anything outside of your general skin? Treat it the same way. My shirt, in comparison to my skin, is pretty dark. I could color the whole thing, but I see like my shoulder's got a little bit of a highlight area right there. So I'll find that angle, just like we did before. All right, let's do that. Find that angle. See if it lines up to anything. Oh, it kind of right to the edge of my ear. Where's my ear? Right about there. So somewhere in here, I've got kind of a highlighted area. So as I'm shading in, and again, nice and soft, you can use your charcoal if you bought that, or just notice how for my pencil, I've kind of shaved down a little bit more than normal. It's not a sharp tip because I want it to be nice and soft. And let's just shade this whole blob in. Very soft, very simple. You can always go back with your eraser, so don't worry about trying to get it perfect the first time. Okay, if you make a mistake, your eraser can be as valuable as your pencil. Okay, something like that. Keep going along. Anywhere you see a shape, a big shape that can be shaded in, and again, try to make sure, keep it as a shape. You don't want just lines, right? Keep it as kind of a thin or a thick blobular shape. If you could cut it out of construction paper, then it's good. If you couldn't cut it out of construction paper, it's probably too thin to worry about. And the more you do this, slowly, it's gonna be like a photograph developing before your eyes. You're gonna start to see like, oh, that kind of starts to look like me a little bit. Okay, this big blob here underneath my hat. Now, I'm not really pushing very hard. You shouldn't really have multiple values. You just want black or white. That's it. So just like our second project, we're going from abstract lines into abstract shapes, okay? Just positive or negative, on or off, black or white. If you're not quite sure, if you're looking at it, you're like, well, that hat is darker than my neck. Cool, you're the artist, choose. Is it yes or is it no? You can also smooth out some of those corners a little bit. A good way to think about it is this. If I wanted to draw a circle, right, but I could only use straight lines, watch this. I'll use one of my kids' markers. If I could only use straight lines, right, I could draw kind of a square, and then I could cut the edges of that square off and get an octagon, and I could cut these edges off of that and get a, I don't know, what is that, a decagon? I don't know. And then I could cut the edges off of that, and I could cut the edges off of that, and I could cut the edges off of that, until I get a circle. This is the principle that we're working with. You're using straight lines to eventually get to something that looks more rounded and more smooth, right? There's absolutely going to be points where you're looking at it and you kind of say, ooh, wait, I messed that up. I got to fix that. So fix it. Fix it now while you're still in the construction phase, than trying to go through and draw the world's most perfect eyeball and then nothing else fits, right? It develops together. Step 1, lines. Step 2, shapes. That's it. We haven't even really talked about the three-dimensionality of it yet. We're just talking about shapes and forms and lines, exactly like we did for our first and second projects. It's almost like I had this planned out the entire time. Go figure. I'm not going to worry about the logo on a hat. If you have text on your t-shirt or something, I'm telling you here and now, just ignore it. It's not worth your time. It's too much hassle. Just ignore it. We want to see you. We don't really want to see the brands that you're choosing to wear. Even this still might have a little bit of a caricature to it, and that's perfectly okay. It still won't look photorealistic, but it will start to look more like you. If you show it to like a loved one without your reference, they should be able to tell that you're in there somewhere. If you show it to a stranger, they're going to wonder why you're talking to them, but after that, they probably won't recognize you. That's okay. Okay, so you get your big shapes. Don't worry about fine detail. Like, I really want to get in there and fix those teeth. Don't. It's too tiny to worry about. Okay. Once you get to the point where you're generally happy with it, and, you know, again, kind of a good enough scenario, once you're there, then we're going to go through, just like our other project, and go from 2 values, black and white, and start expanding that out. We're going to stretch that from 2 into 3, from 3 into 5, right? So if I have black and I have white, in the middle, I'll get kind of a light gray, right? In between that, I'll get a whitish gray, and over here, I'll get a darkish gray. Those are very technical terms, right? So I go from 2 to 3 to 5. If you're working in the 5 range, that's exactly where you want to be. If you're going to do photorealistic, you want to take the 5 and plug in betweens in there, and you're going to get up to 9. 9 is the most you could ever want for. Don't ever go more than 9, but that's only if you're doing photorealism, and we're not. So 5 is perfectly fine. So I'm going to go from this, let's say for the neck area, right? Okay, well, I can see there's still some shading on this side. So I'm going to do like a light gray. I'm just pressing softer. You can even blend it out if you want to. And don't be afraid to go back and say, oh, well, now that I blended that out, I want that to be a little bit darker still. Something that can help is if, as you're looking at your picture, think about where is your absolute darkest value. In my case, I would say it's this triangle underneath my hat. That looks really dark. So really just hammer down on that. Kind of commit to it and say, okay, that is the absolute darkest shadow. Everything has to relate to that. So when you're looking at your t-shirt, how dark is it compared to that shadow? Well, it's pretty dark. It's not as dark, but it is dark. So I'm gonna press down a little bit more. You can go in different directions and really darken that area in. And we're just using pencil, nothing really to it. We've been using a lot of watercolor and painting lately. This is the same process you would do if you want to get into painting. It's the same thing. It really is. You're just finding those values and you're kind of stretching it from only a handful of values into a few more, right? Going from 2 to 3 to 5. Looking at kind of like the wrinkles in the hat, just like we dealt with, thinking about how to draw a work of still life. Maybe your still life had some fabric to it. Thinking about kind of the wrinkles that make that up. But those wrinkles really are, watch this, a medium gray. And I'm gonna take my eraser and just pull some highlight back out. Right? Easy. Skin, what could we do? Well, I could kind of think about where my shadows are. What I like to do is kind of an overall kind of gray. It's called toning your canvas. A little bit of a gray, and that makes the white pop that much more. So I want that highlight on my cheek. I want to highlight over here on this cheek, right? And that lets you build up a sense of value. I'm looking at it, I think that chin's a little bit too big. Okay, so you keep building these values up, blending your colors out. If you're gonna blend, you can use your fingers. I would suggest grabbing just a piece of paper or napkin, Kleenex, something like that, and letting that do the work for you. Your fingers naturally have oils on them that can actually hurt the paper underneath. So something to think about. And if you overblend and you lose all that good detail, just go back and erase it back in. Use your eraser as much as you're using your pencil. If you like kind of those lines and you don't want to blend it out, don't blend it. It's completely up to you. What style are you going to go with? The one thing we're not going to worry about is the background. You don't need to worry about coloring in or drawing anything in the background, because when you're done drawing on your good paper, we'll take our current design and we're going to add it to our portrait. When you're drawing, you are welcome to draw on your good paper, either landscape or portrait mode. So for example, I'm holding my paper landscape right now. It is longer, or you can rotate it so that it's taller, however you want to do it. You're also welcome to place your portrait anywhere you want to. You want to do a tiny little portrait in the bottom, you're allowed. It's going to be really hard to fit that much detail on a tiny spot. I would suggest that you draw larger, right? Fill the paper with your portrait, and then that means you have to transfer less. But in my case, I'm going to do a landscape, and I think I'm going to put my portrait kind of off on the side, right about here-ish. So I will use those measurements to place my portrait. You're going to draw right off the edge of the paper, okay? Take your time, think about those steps. Step 1, lines. Step 2, black and white shapes. Step 3, taking that black and white and making it into a softer value. You will end up with something looking pretty good. We've also got plenty of time to work on this, so I'll be in person and online able to help you, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and do my project and let you guys watch. And then if you do have any questions, always make sure to reach out. I'll see you again for the final video in our class where we put everything together. Thanks for joining me. See you soon.